Abandoned in a snowstorm, an amazing little girl's hidden story was discovered by a billionaire. The wind howled like a furious beast outside Lila Thompson's tiny cabin, rattling the worn wood and sending chills racing through her fingers. 8 years old and already navigating a world that felt far too harsh, Lila gazed out at the endless blanket of white. Snow swirled against the window, and with it came memories of her mother, moments filled with laughter and warmth, now replaced by a gaping void. Abandoned. That word lingered, heavier than the snow piling against her door. No one would come. She was alone, and the biting cold of that Montana winter pierced deeper than flesh. Yet, within the shadows of her solitude, Lila summoned worlds of wonder crafted from nothing more than her fierce imagination. Here, she was not a girl left behind, she was a heroine, a fierce warrior battling dragons and discovering lost kingdoms. Despite the chill wrapping around her heart like frostbite, Lila found solace in her stories. Yet as evening drew near and the darkness swallowed the cabin, anxiety wrestled against the solace she'd found. What if she didn't have enough food to last? What if the cold became too much? Questions clawed at her insides, whispering doubts that her imaginary worlds tried in vain to drown out. The idea of rescue wove its way through her mind like a tangled vine. She wanted someone, desperately a guardian angel to rescue her, but feared what they defined within that tiny cabin. Would they see her as the fragile thing she felt? Or would they recognize her strength hidden beneath fragile layers? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the hours dragged on, Lila's stories grew darker, more tangled with her fears, like a winter storm brewing beyond endless drifts. Each character she conjured bore glimmers of who she once was, pieces woven together in the hopes of keeping the cold, despairing thoughts at bay. And just when the chill threatened to engulf her spirit, she heard a sound that was both foreign and familiar, a crunching beneath a layer of snow. Intrigued, she pressed her forehead against the window, heart racing at the prospect of company. Was it a passing traveler? No. It was just the weight of the storm outside, slipping silently back into the depths of frozen night. The moment of hope vanished like frost on grass. Her spirit, resilient yet weary, crumbled beneath the weight of loneliness. She fought to rise above it, felt the urge to scream, to reach out, but the yearning remained buried deep, choked by fear of vulnerability. And then there was the promise of a life less burdened, the chance for her stories to ignite sparks beyond her cabin. Lila knew that if someone discovered her tales, if they saw the brilliance hidden beneath the cold despair surrounding her, perhaps everything could change. Yet, the fear of change, of facing a world that may be unkind, gripped her tightly. As the snow continued to swirl, so did her mind, caught between the longing for rescue and the fear of losing what little remained of her fragile existence. Would the warmth of another human being become an anchor or an impossible wave pulling her further into an ocean of uncertainty? The wind echoed outside, but the fiercest storm raged within her heart, one that only another's embrace, a friend or a savior, could quiet. As the realization dawned that she would soon need to choose between her stories and the world outside, an ache settled in her chest. All she could do was hope that fate held a spark of grace in its icy grasp. What lay ahead in her future remained a labyrinth cloaked in shadows, yet, deep down, Lila yearned for the day she would step out among the dragons she once conquered fully. The night deepened, but so did her resolve, embodying two warring truths, the need for connection and the fear of being seen. As the first light of dawn pierced through the gnarled branches of the surrounding trees, Lila awoke to a world transformed, the blanket of white now glittering like a sea of diamonds beneath a pale blue sky. Yet, the beauty surrounding her felt distant, an echo of the warmth she desperately craved. Alone in the cabin, she wrestled with the remnants of the tempest swirling within, a stark contrast to the serene beauty outside. Her heart ached with the thought that today could be different, a day filled with possibilities. Gathering the remnants of her courage, Lila shifted her focus to the few supplies she had left. The rations were dwindling but not entirely exhausted. She had to make a plan, something concrete she could grasp with both hands. Thoughts of her stories lingered, characters she had birthed from the depths of her imagination, found inspiration from them, and now they awaited her action. She decided to venture outside, push against the walls that confined her. The moment she stepped into the cold, frosty air, it struck her with a brutal clarity: she was trapped within her fears. Walking through the snow felt different now, each step heavy with both reluctance and resolve. Every crunch beneath her boots was a reminder that she could move, that she could brave the world waiting beyond her solitude. This was no longer merely escape, it was an assertion of her existence. At the old oak tree just beyond her cabin, Lila struck a figure known only in her stories, a brave knight. With each movement, she became part of her narrative, infusing her surroundings with light. The little girl draped in shadows was transformed into a bold hero, wielding a stick like a sword against the imaginary foes she once feared. For a moment, the empowerment surged within her. She imagined creating paths instead of barriers. As she played, the glimmer of exploration sparked a deeper yearning within her. Was it possible that by embracing her creativity, she could forge connections outside the confines of her cabin? She envisioned sharing tales of wonder, casting bridges to the outside, a world filled with possibilities instead of isolation. In her stories, she had conquered realms and saved kingdoms. Perhaps she could do the same in real life. Upon returning to the cabin, a rush of determination flooded her senses. Lila decided to channel her energy into a project, a story to share with whoever might come by. With the few materials at her disposal, she began crafting a tale unlike any she had told before, one that reinforced her spirit while inviting the attention she had so long craved. Pages scattered across the rickety table became her battleground, her scattered thoughts merging into an epic woven with threads of her experience. Yet, as confidence blossomed, doubt slithered in. What if her writings made her more vulnerable? What if being seen revealed too much? Each line she penned drew her closer to the precipice of exposure, but then, she recalled the warmth from her stories that had kept her company through the coldest nights. The urgency to be embraced by the world loomed large in her mind, dancing alongside her doubts. There, at the cabin's heart, Lila stood at the crossroad of power and fear. To shield herself with silence felt easier, but she wanted more than that. She desired to be felt and seen, to touch lives as her own had fought for breath. The moment crystallized, she could remain a quiet shadow or step into the light, embracing whatever came next. Her pen hovered over the paper, poised to inscribe the conclusion of her tale. Would she opt for the safety of solitude, or could she muster the bravery to share her soul? The moment beckoned with both danger and promise, and beyond the cabin door, the world waited, holding its breath. With a deep breath, Lila pressed the pen to the page. This was only the beginning. And as she thought of who might discover her story, a curl of fear mingled with the thrill of anticipation. Lila had glimpsed the horizon of her potential, but did she have the courage to cross it? The answer lingered just out of reach, a tantalizing mystery that beckoned her closer. With her pen finally touching the paper, Lila felt a surge of adrenaline. Words flowed like melting snow, rich with warmth and light, illuminating the depths of her heart. Each phrase became a river, carving pathways through her uncertainty, as she wrote with fervent determination. Yet, even amid this creative delirium, a shadow lurked at the edges of her consciousness, a voice whispering doubts. Is this worth the risk? It asked, creeping into her thoughts, a chilling gust interrupting her flow. Majestic words turned into stumbling stones, falling short of the breathtaking vision she sought to create. Lila paused, staring at the page, her inked promise of bravery poised to reveal fragments of her reality. Could she truly expose the fissures of her soul to the world? The thought alone was paralyzing. Memories of rejection layered like heavy snowflakes, isolating and suffocating, threatened to bury her alive. She had once been told her dreams were foolish. Like many, she had borne the weight of others' perceptions. Now, on this page, she could either summon her boldest creations or simply let fear dictate her fate. Lila took a deep breath, pushing against that repression. She closed her eyes, imagining the world she had once conjured with unapologetic grandeur. In her mind, her characters had faced wrathful dragons, treacherous terrains, and insurmountable challenges, all of which they bravely confronted. If they could confront their demons, so could she. She had to make a choice, to create or to be crushed under the weight of her past judgments. Start small, she told herself. Write for you first. With that, Lila unfurled her vulnerability and scribbled without a filter, pouring truths onto the paper. The act, raw and exhilarating, felt akin to tearing down walls. The air was finally crisp and fresh, inviting and liberating, like the first crack of dawn. Pages filled rapidly, a stunning tapestry of her emotional landscape unfurling before her. Yet, amidst this bloom of creativity, the vulnerability she feared gripped her stomach again. What if her unrefined voice cried out too loudly? Or if it revealed her heart more than she wished? Uncertainty festered, forcing her to confront the notion of rejection in an entirely new light. What if the real rejection was self-inflicted? The sun glinted through the cabin window, shifting her surroundings, illuminating the place she considered both sanctuary and prison. A small feather floated lazily in the shaft of light, and she marveled at its simplicity. It wasn't burdened by judgment or expectations. The feather was free. You can be free too, she whispered, as though trying to convince herself. Could she reshape her narrative? Draw strength not only from triumph but from pain, too? Each decision she now made mattered. In the shadows, her third act of courage emerged. She would share her writing. Driven by the acute realization that being open could cultivate a deeper resilience, she chose to extend her vision beyond solitude to spark connection rather than retreat into silence. The quest grew clearer: allow her prose to invite dialogue, to unveil a semblance of freedom she so long sought. As evening nestled into the world outside, Lila sat back, her fingers momentarily suspended over the pages filled with her history. She had written about loss, love, adventure, and each thread braided into something far greater than fear. This realization washed over her writing. Wasn't solely about protecting her spirit, it was about serving as a beacon, a lighthouse, seeking those shipwrecked by isolation, just as she had been. But the very moment she decided to share her truth, a knot curled in her stomach. The stakes had never been higher. The reality of vulnerability gnawed at her, the looming specter of judgment almost palpable. Yet, in that instant, she recognized a bittersweet excitement. The world awaited her revelations, and within those revelations lay her true story. Would she allow this endeavor to transform her narrative from solitary confinement into a powerful testament of resilience? A rush of determination surged through her, but the pressing question remained: was she prepared to face whatever awaited outside of her carefully curated words? It seemed the real journey was just beginning, and the next pen stroke could alter the essence of who she was known to be. Emboldened, Lila rose from the table, her heart racing as she faced the door. It was time to step into the light, to brave not just her narrative but the world beyond the walls of her own making. Could she confront the shadows lurking in the minds of others? With one last glance backward over her shoulder, she gripped the doorknob and turned. The simplicity of that motion echoed with seismic possibilities. What awaited beyond her threshold was still unknown, but one truth resonated clear: there was treasure hidden in every encounter, every fear, and every ambition. Today, she would cross from the solitude of her cabin into the expanse of uncharted territories, ready to reclaim her narrative. The world beckoned, and Lila was poised for the adventure that lay ahead, uncertain yet excited. As the door creaked open, bursting forth a breath of fresh, cold air, she paused. Maybe in pursuing her stories, she would discover not just the voice she longed for, but also the strength to confront those who would challenge her. The time had come to face the horizon of her fears, and with every intention, she stepped forward. Would her boldness amplify her connections, or would the specter of her past threaten to unravel everything she had fought to create? The chill of the early evening air cut through Lila's skin as she stepped outside, her heart racing with a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. The vast expanse of the snowy landscape stretched out before her, a blank canvas mirroring the undefined potential she now faced. Each breath she took was a reminder of her decision, a blend of freedom and fear. The world was no longer a mere backdrop, it was a testing ground for her burgeoning courage. As she walked, questions ricocheted in her mind. Where would she begin? Should she reach out to those who might critique her work? Every interaction possessed a tantalizing, vibrating potential, a delicate thread waiting to be woven into her narrative. She had spent too long buried beneath self-doubt, suffocated by the weight of external expectations. Now, the idea of engaging with the world felt like a revelation, yet it terrified her. Every step felt monumental, each footprint a defiance of her past hesitations. With newfound resolve, she turned toward the closest town, a small enclave where she could unearth the connections that eluded her for so long. The streets, lined with quaint shops and warmly lit windows, beckoned invitingly. But as she approached, her mind began tossing up barriers. What if her truth, raw and unmasked, was met with ridicule? The thought alone twisted her gut. Lila forced herself to slow down, grounding her thoughts. There were whispers of creativity hidden in this town, she knew it. Writers, artists, musicians all sharing their souls while navigating the volatile sea of vulnerability. Perhaps she could find a local bookstore or cafe, a place where the scent of coffee mingled with ink, where her fears could lessen in the presence of camaraderie. As she turned a corner, enthusiasm surged through her veins, tinged with trepidation. The town center loomed before her, bustling with life. A flicker of insecurity sprang up again. Was she just another face in the crowd? For too long, she had viewed herself as an imposter navigating someone else's reality. But could she transform these thoughts into a source of strength, rather than allowing them to dictate her actions? Adrenaline surged, and with it, a quiet voice began to take charge. You are not an imposter. You are Lila. The words played softly in her mind like an incantation, summoning a boldness from deep within. She spotted an inviting bookstore adorned with colorful signs promoting local authors and upcoming readings. The sight tugged at her heartstrings, summoning a fierce longing. Walking through the doors felt like crossing a threshold into a new universe. The air smelled of paper and possibility. Inside, a woman with kind eyes and a welcoming smile stood behind the counter. Can I help you? She asked, her tone warm and genuine. I'm looking for a way to share my writing, Lila said, her voice tremulous yet edged with determination. I've written a lot and I think it's time. But I'm scared. The woman nodded thoughtfully, her gaze steady and understanding. Sharing our truths is never easy, but it's also where connection begins. We host readings every Friday. You could read a piece of your work. It can be a great space to start, among writers and listeners who appreciate vulnerability. Lila felt the walls of fear slowly beginning to crack. Every word exchanged was like balm on her insecurities. I'd like that. I really would. She surprised herself with her own sincerity, letting the idea settle into her being. As they discussed details, Lila's heart swelled with a mix of apprehension and excitement. The prospect of reading her work aloud to strangers felt immensely liberating. Yet, deeper within, the familiar specter of self-doubt began to stir again, whispering uncertainties. What if she stumbled? What if the audience didn't resonate with her truth? Then, amidst the rising tide of uncertainty, a realization dawned. The very act of sharing was a testament to her growth, an evolution from solitude to connection. Each word she revealed wasn't merely a reflection of her past, it was also an invitation for others to engage with their own stories and struggles. By the time she left the bookstore, Lila felt a heavy cloak of doubt had been lifted. The chill in the air was no longer a burden, it invigorated her spirit. Her future awaited, steeped in both promise and the unknown. As she walked back through the cobblestone streets, she considered the looming event ahead. It was becoming apparent that her exploration of the world would not only serve her personal narrative but also challenge her to reclaim the fragments of her identity that had long been obscured. The moments ahead promised tension and revelation, and with each step, she felt she was moving closer to something powerful, whether that was confirmation of her worth or a harsh reminder of her fears, she couldn't be sure, but Lila was ready. Ready to delve into vulnerability and perhaps, in doing so, discover strength she never knew she possessed. Would this leap into the unexpected allow her to finally break free from her fears, or would it unravel the very fabric she had worked so hard to weave? Either way, the question loomed thick in the night air. Was she prepared for the fullness of her own story? The week leading up to the reading felt like an eternity, each day stretching and compressing in a rhythm she couldn't quite control. Lila spent countless hours in her small apartment, drafting and redrafting the piece she intended to share. Her words transformed from chaotic expressions of raw emotion into sharpened reflections of her experiences. Yet, with each tweak and polish, fear slithered into her thoughts, mocking her effort. Did they matter? Would anyone even connect with her story? Her evening walks turned into rituals of self-affirmation, where she recited her work aloud to the empty streets, her voice rising against the stark backdrop of winter. The frigid air that once rattled her bones now became a companion, her only ally in confronting the growing anxiety that clung to her. What if I blank out? She muttered one evening, her voice barely above a whisper as she paced along street lamps flickering against the dusk. What if they don't understand what I'm trying to say? Each question left a heavy stone in her stomach, anchoring her to her doubts. She had to confront this nagging voice, this internal dialogue festering with uncertainty. At last, on a particularly cold evening, she stumbled into an old cafe, its warm glow spilling out like a beacon. The place buzzed with conversation, words weaving through the air like music. She settled into a corner, the chatter and the clinking of cups grounding her. There, amidst the noise, a thought ignited. There was power in embracing vulnerability. Every patron in that cafe was engaged in their own personal narrative. They were navigating their individual storms, sharing laughter and insights. With that realization surged an exhilarating sense of kinship, a flicker of hope. Maybe it was time to view her upcoming reading not as a trial but as a shared journey, a communal exploration of the human experience. Inspired, Lila picked up her pen and began to write again. This time with a sense of curiosities rather than constraints. The words flowed like snow melting on a warm spring day, and she began to reframe her fears as building blocks for deeper connections. But as the day of the reading approached, the anxiety escalated. She battled with self-sabotaging thoughts late into the night. Each tentative commitment to her narrative met with flashes of doubt. The familiar shadow that whispered debilitating truths crept back in, reminding her of previous failures and rejections. Could this be the moment that defined her as a writer? On the eve of the reading, she lay in bed, heart racing as images of past humiliations replayed in her mind. A sudden noise, a rattle of wind against her window, startled her. It felt all too familiar, mirroring the storm of conflict brewing within. She took a deep breath, pulling the blanket closer, determined to fight back against the storm of doubt. Then, in the stillness of the night, Lila reached for her notebook, pouring her thoughts and fears onto the page, making tangible what felt so insurmountable. She recognized now that vulnerability was not a weakness but a powerful tool. With each stroke of her pen, she began to unravel a lifetime of stories and emotions, each sentence a thread weaving new understanding. The next morning, Lila woke, the sun shining through her window, illuminating the unfinished pages scattered around her like fragments of her soul. As she prepared to step out into the world, she felt a vibrational shift. The anticipation of the reading electrified her, electrified the very essence of her being, but standing in front of the bookstore, nerves clawed at her throat. She paused, peering through the glass at the gathering crowd. Was she truly ready to unmask herself in front of a sea of unfamiliar faces? The stakes felt higher than ever, exposing herself to judgment and indifference. In that moment of hesitation, she reflected on the words she had written the night before. They pulsed with honesty, a declaration of the journey she had undergone. It is not merely a performance, she thought suddenly, it is a glimpse into a life, my life. The moment called for courage, the very thing she had summoned throughout her week of preparation. Taking a deep breath, she reached for the door handle, and with a resolve she hadn't known she possessed, she walked into the bookstore. As Lila joined the gathering, she caught the eyes of fellow writers and listeners, their expressions reflecting a shared purpose. The storm inside her began to dissipate, a quiet determination rising in its place, but beneath that sense of courage lay a promise of confrontation, for she knew that no matter the outcome of the evening, she would finally have to face her self-doubt head-on. And as the host called for the first reader, Lila experienced a rush of adrenaline. Would she rise to this occasion, breaking the chains of her former self? Would her voice resonate? With her heart pounding, she stepped closer to the stage, the weight of her truth swirling in the air around her. What awaited her at that microphone would not just be a recital of words but perhaps a confrontation of a lifetime. Could she emerge from this experience transformed, or would her fears silence her yet again? The flickering lights of the bookstore illuminated Lila's path as she stood on the precipice of her own transformation. The air crackled with energy, writers mingled, sharing hushed whispers and laughter that felt foreign yet strangely inviting to her. Each step toward the stage swelled the tempest of emotions inside her. It was as if she were inching toward a precipice, not of failure, but of self-discovery, but with every heartbeat, the gravity of the moment sank deeper into her chest. Memories of attempted performances flashed through her mind, ones where she faltered, lost her words, and felt the weight of judgment hang thick in the air. This time will be different, she affirmed silently, though the ghost of doubt lingered. Could her narrative, raw and unrefined yet crafted with courage, find resonance in others' hearts? The host's voice rose from the background, a comforting reminder that she was not alone. The gathering buzzed with understanding, a collective anticipation, each listener ideally positioned as a witness to her truth. But truth felt heavy. Could she really lay bare her soul before them? As Lila's name echoed through the bookstore, a rush of heat flooded her cheeks. The wood beneath her feet felt solid as she approached the microphone, giving her an unfounded belief in her own stability. She glanced at the warm faces peering back at her, each expression a blend of curiosity, empathy, encouragement. In an instant she couldn't quite articulate, she realized that rather than judging, they were rooting for her. "Hello, everyone," her voice began, sounding steadier than she felt. It trembled with nervous energy, but she sensed it was also laced with something more, a growing conviction, a willingness to be seen. As she opened her notebook, familiar swirls of ink beckoned her to dive in, the pages filled with the labor of her recent nights. Following a deep inhale, Lila shared the first line of her story, letting the words spill out with authenticity. With each sentence, she felt fissures in her long-held insecurities expanding, allowing truth to seep out. "This is who I am," she thought as her heart drummed a frenzied beat. The weighty chains of expectation began to rust away with every chuckle and gasp from the audience, their reactions reinforcing her courage. Suddenly, her rhythm faltered. A flurry of images surged, faces of past rejections, the cold grip of isolation. It almost stilled her tongue. But then, she recalled the warmth of that cafe, the realization that vulnerability could carve bridges, building empathy rather than walls. Swiftly, she pivoted the moment in her mind, she transformed the fear into energy. Yet, she continued, her voice gaining strength, "I have learned that pain is not a solo journey." The words tumbled forth, her narrative turned into a dialogue of shared experience. The atmosphere shifted palpably as Lila began to embrace her imperfections, confessing her struggles and aspirations. Her authenticity enveloped her as the audience matched her vulnerability with their own stories reflected in her words. As she neared the conclusion, jubilation coursed through her. With every iteration of "I am not alone," the girl who once stood shackled by self-doubt emerged anew, stronger and infinitely more resolute. When she finally delivered her closing lines, a rush of breathless silence followed. The weight of her words hung in the air like fragile glass. For an instant, everything froze as if the world paused in reverence. That was her moment, the culmination of a week of doubt and an entire lifetime of waiting for self-acceptance. Then, the applause erupted, a warm tidal wave crashing against her. Lila's chest tightened again, but this time with gratitude instead of fear. She stepped down from the stage, and with each step back, she felt lighter, the remnants of anxiety replaced by a sense of belonging. Yet as accolades washed over her like rain, a new unease settled in the pit of her stomach. Was this euphoria fleeting? Would she be able to push past this new threshold, delve deeper into her narrative, and navigate through the complexities of her evolving self? The internal dialogue shifted, giving rise to unasked questions that hung thick in the air, unresolved. The truth awaited her in the layers of her own story. But as she smiled and accepted the compliments, she knew one thing: she had merely scratched the surface. What lay beneath was a deeper journey of exploration yet to unfold. Would she dare to embrace that journey, or would the shadows of her past continue to haunt her? Lila paused, the fading applause echoing in her ears. With a heart still racing, she stepped deeper into the crowd, not yet aware of what awaited her around the next corner of her destiny. As Lila pushed through the crowd, the warmth of commendation surrounded her. She felt buoyant, yet a nagging sense of trepidation clawed at her heart. The taste of achievement was sweet, but it had quickly shifted to contemplation. What was next? Could one performance redefine her? She navigated away from clumps of enthusiastic conversations, the noise of celebration fading as she found a quiet nook by a tall bookshelf. The spines of volumes stood like sentinels, protecting the secrets of the stories within. Air saturated with the scent of old pages and polished wood engulfed her, calming her tumultuous thoughts. But as she set her notebook on the shelf and glanced at the words that had once felt like an exorcism, doubt bubbled anew. What if this was a one-time burst of courage, like a flame flickering dangerously close to extinction? Could she mature this spark into a consistent fire that would guide her through the uncharted territories of her personal ambitions? Lila absently traced her fingers over the covers of the books, each one a reminder some stories were just beginning, while others had long reached their climax. Could she embrace that transformative process herself? Her mind wandered toward the murmurs of the crowd. There were agents, editors, writers, all people who had taken that leap, who transformed stumbling words into published works. Their successes felt daunting and, at the same time, a whisper of encouragement. She could be one of them, unable to fathom that a mere week ago, she was hesitant to take this first step. Was she ready? She mentally prodded herself. The lingering shadows of insecurity flickered like the remnants of a candle struggling against a gust of wind. Suddenly, she recalled her earlier words, "I am not alone." Those words clung to her, vibrant and audacious. If she could voice that truth before an audience, did it not grant her some authority over her narrative? Yes, she had the right to explore her evolution, to share the fragments of her life that resonated with a talented community driven by the same desires and fears. Deep within, a wave of determination surged. Lila felt the urge to push past just this fleeting moment, to plan deeper engagements with her craft, even if it frightened her. She could write a blog, join workshops, or create an online series sharing her journey. Each action would tether her more closely to her evolving identity. The bookstore was a sanctuary tonight, but it was also a launching pad. With a rekindled sense of purpose, Lila paused, envisioning a path strewn with potential hardships and jubilations, networking with mentors, enduring critiques, and witnessing personal growth. As she stepped back into the flow of the crowd, a thought crossed her mind: what if the success of one story opened doors for others? Could she inspire that kid in a small town to see possibilities where none seemed to exist? She allowed a smile to curve her lips, the shadows recoiling as confidence took their place. Yet, an unexpected voice disrupted her thoughts. A tall figure stood a few feet away, with a sharp gaze that felt both daunting and intriguing. He was uncharacteristically intense, juxtaposing the warm atmosphere around them. With an almost palpable energy, he approached her, his intentions unreadable. Lila's heart raced, not from fear, but from the potential that this moment might unravel her carefully laid plans. "The time has come to face the truth," he said, his voice steady yet imposing. "You're hiding a talent far greater than you realize. It's time you discover what lies beneath the surface." She raised an eyebrow, reality clashing with possibility. What did he know about her hidden struggles? Did he believe in her potential as much as she was beginning to? And, more importantly, was she ready to confront whatever truth he might reveal? Lila's pulse quickened, the tension in the air thick with implications. The next chapter of her journey was waiting, and uncertainty loomed ahead like an untraveled road. Lila remained poised, her breath caught in her chest as the figure drew closer, his presence radiating an air of intensity that both intimidated and intrigued her. She studied his face, a blend of sharp features marked by an earnestness that pierced through her layers of uncertainty. Was this a mentor waiting to be discovered, or another obstacle on her path? "Who are you?" she managed, her voice steadier than her shaking knees. His lips curled into a thoughtful smile, as if amused by her caution. "I'm someone who sees beyond the surface." He gestured towards her notebook resting on the shelf. "Those words you penned, there's more to them than you know." Lila felt a rush of indignation. "You don't know me." The assertion was more defensive than she intended, a flicker of her previous doubts igniting again. "True," he replied, unperturbed. "But I sense a depth within you waiting to unfold. It's easy to sit in the comfort of anonymity rather than embrace the challenge of authenticity." Her heart raced. This wasn't a mere encounter, it felt like a confrontation with her own limitations. As she absorbed his words, a question laced with vulnerability arose within her: what if he was right? "What do you mean, authenticity?" she asked, the term weighing heavily in her mind. Expectations wove threads of doubt around her, tying her to a past rife with hesitation. "Authenticity is embracing who you are, flaws and all. The world doesn't need imitation, it craves genuine expression." His gaze locked onto hers, intensifying the moment. "You're at a crossroads, Lila. You can either retreat to safety or forge ahead and explore who you could become." His words echoed within her. The dance between fear and growth had always been her companion, and for too long, fear had led. But what if she leaned into that discomfort instead? Could she discover new realms of her talent hiding beneath the surface? Feeling both exposed and empowered, Lila hesitated before replying. "So, what do you suggest I do?" She needed guidance, a roadmap to navigate through the dense fog of uncertainty. "Take risks. Join workshops where you can showcase your writing. Reach out to people who can provide critiques, constructive ones. Start that blog you've thought about. And most importantly, be unafraid of judgment. Each experience will add to your growth." The prospect of action sparked something inside her, a desire to break the chains that had held her captive for too long. But insecurities lingered. "What if I fail?" she questioned, vulnerability creeping back in. "Failure is limiting belief disguised as a reality. If you see it as a lesson rather than an end, you can evolve." He paused, allowing his words to settle in the air between them. "You have potential that exceeds your imagination. The world needs your voice, Lila." A fire ignited in her, mirroring the intensity in his eyes. "How do you know?" "Because," he said with conviction, "I was once standing where you are now, brimming with potential yet shackled by self-doubt." His revelation landed heavily, transforming her perception of their exchange. If he had traversed the same landscape of hesitation, perhaps his insight held more weight than the fleeting insecurities that clouded her mind. "How do I begin?" she asked, resolve slowly replacing her hesitation. "Start now." His smile radiated encouragement. "Find a small platform, share a story, and don't shy away from showing your true self. The rest will follow." Lila felt the gravity of his challenge burrow into her core. Could she leap from this precipice of fear and embrace the unfolding narrative of her life? As the warmth of possibility washed over her, a newfound fear surged. The decision she faced transcended mere external actions, it insisted she delve into the heart of her buried truths. What was she truly capable of? And as she stood lost in contemplation, the air thickened with anticipation. Lila realized that the road ahead would demand more than just courage, it would require confrontations with her deepest vulnerabilities. A sudden clarity swept through her. "Can you help me?" she ventured, watching for any flicker of hesitation in his eyes. His expression remained steady, now filled with the kind of confidence she craved. "Only if you're willing to embrace the uncomfortable truths." Her future awaited stretched before her like an unmarked map. And as Lila took a deep breath, sealing her resolve, a new question echoed: Was she ready to unveil the stories that had long laid dormant within her? Determined, she nodded. The next destination was unclear, but she had finally summoned enough resolve to step forward. The thrill of becoming, and the uncertain winds of change, beckoned her with promises of transformation. Lila walked away from the encounter, her heart a whirlwind of emotions. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of her own potential pressed down on her. The once comforting blanket of anonymity threatened to suffocate her. What did it truly mean to embrace authenticity? The questions gnawed at her relentlessly. She found herself back at her small desk, staring at the familiar chaos of her thoughts spilling out in ink. The notebook a refuge and prison, so many stories left untold. As her fingers hovered above the pages, she battled an urge to retreat to her safe haven of silence, yet that interaction loomed over her like a lighthouse, tempting her toward the tumultuous waters of self-discovery. Workshops, critiques, a blog, she murmured to herself. The very notion sent her heart racing with anxiety. Could she bear the fragility of having her words exposed? What would it feel like to have strangers dissect her thoughts, her narratives? Uncertainty gnawed at the edges of her resolve. But was the risk of exposure any greater than the pain of remaining stagnant? Decision hung in the air like a pendulum, swaying between fear and the glittering allure of possibility. First things first, she decided, she needed a plan. Gathering her scattered thoughts was her first act of courage. She opened the notebook and leaped into action, furiously writing down her ideas, potential story themes, and the emotions living within her narratives. What she believed was a simple outline quickly morphed into freewriting, an outpouring of vulnerability draped in raw honesty. Each line flowed with thoughts about her childhood, her fears, her aspirations. Paragraph by paragraph, she unearthed stories she had buried beneath layers of self-doubt, but as she wrote, shadows of voices from her past crept in, echoing criticisms that had stifled her creative spirit. You're not good enough. Who do you think you are? The self-imposed weight of their judgments pressed onto her, yet she pressed on, leaning into the discomfort. Who would you be without those voices? She chastised herself, tapping the pen against the side of the notebook. What if you chose to ignore them instead? This was her moment of confrontation. A facade of self-criticism cracked, exposing a flicker of defiance. Emerging from her writing session with a clearer perspective, Lila felt a determination settle around her like armor. She was not simply aspiring to write, she was confronting the very narrative that had controlled her for years. Each stroke of her pen reminded her of the strength her words could wield. That evening, fueled by a newfound energy, Lila sat before her computer. A blank blog page glared back at her, a vacant landscape waiting to be transformed. The idea of sharing her thoughts online electrified her. What if she could reach out to others? What if her stories resonated with someone drowning in similar doubts? As she hesitated, fingers resting on the keyboard, a rush of fear arose. What if her words fell flat? What if they were met with indifference? Confronting this fear became an essential part of the decision. You will never know unless you try, she whispered firmly. Taking a deep breath, she began typing. Each letter felt like an invocation of authenticity, drawing from the depths of her experience. She wrote about her journey, her struggles, the exhilaration and terror entwined with her growth. No censor, no hesitation. It was a story, raw yet genuine, an imperfect reflection of her process. With every word, Lila felt lighter. The chains of doubt began to crack, giving way to something larger, a potential waiting to be explored. She fought against the mounting tide of self-criticism, focusing instead on what could happen if she chose to let her work exist unapologetically in the world. The night stretched on as she created her first post, a blend of hope and fear pulsing through her veins. Finally, with a lingering sense of anticipation, Lila clicked publish. A wave of exhilaration swept over her. The act itself felt liberating, but as she sat back to reflect, a new apprehension gripped her. What would happen next? Was she prepared to welcome not only validation but also critique, and even disapproval? The prospect of exposure both thrilled and terrified her. Suddenly, her phone buzzed with a notification, a comment from a stranger on her blog. Heart pounding, she opened it, feeling as though she might plunge into the depths of a new reality. The floodgates had opened, but what awaited her on the other side? Only time would reveal whether this step toward authenticity would transform her life in ways she had never imagined. The weeks following her courageous reading blurred together, each day forging Lila Thompson further into a new realm of confidence. As comments and messages rolled in from readers touched by her story, a profound sense of purpose began to take root within her. Each response resonated like a warm ember, igniting her passion for writing and connection. What had begun as an escape from solitude now blossomed into a mission, a means to bridge her isolation with shared experiences. Lila embraced her transformed identity as a burgeoning writer, diving into new projects with a vigor that felt alien yet exhilarating. She spent her mornings drafting new stories, each infused with vulnerability and lessons learned from her past. With each page, she projected fragments of herself, wielding her creativity like armor against the shadows that once haunted her. The fear that had previously tied her to silence now was merely a thrill, a reminder of the growth earned through persistence. Invigorated by each completed piece, Lila began seeking out workshops and local writing groups, eager to immerse herself in collaborative experience. The first meeting was rife with nerves. She surveyed writers of varying expertise, each one delving into their own imaginative worlds. Yet, she recognized an innate truth: they were all there to connect, share, and learn. This realization turned her anxiety into anticipation. How wonderful it felt to be part of something larger than herself. As she engaged in dialogue with her fellow writers, her confidence solidified further. They offered insights, critique, and encouragement, weaving a tapestry of support that illuminated her path. In those moments of communal vulnerability, Lila understood the depth of her own transformation. She had gone from the girl peering out from a cold cabin, paralyzed by fear, to a woman standing confidently on the cusp of her own journey, guided by passion and purpose. But as she thrived within this newfound community, an important milestone awaited her. Lila found herself invited to speak at a literary festival about her writing journey. The thought sent familiar ripples of anxiety through her heart. But this time, instead of shutting down, she recognized it as an opportunity to further confront the remnants of her past insecurities. With a deep breath, she accepted the invitation, her heart racing not from fear, but from anticipation of sharing her evolution. The day approached, and with every second ticking down, Lila poured her energy into crafting a speech. She meticulously reflected on her journey, her initial isolation, her courageous leap to share her truth, and the transformative power of vulnerability that had guided her through this recent chapter. The words flowed freely, her story felt alive, vibrant with purpose. When the day of the festival burst forth, the setting emerged as a familiar embrace. Lila found comfort with the crowd, the buzz of eager listeners welcoming her into their midst. Standing behind the podium, she felt a surge of exhilaration. "Hello everyone," she began, her voice steady and inviting. The residual fear of past failures faded into the background, replaced by a determination that illuminated her presence. "I stand before you not just as a writer but as a testament to the power of sharing our stories." With each word, she shared her voyage, how embracing authenticity had unraveled a deeper potential within her soul. She spoke of despair and determination, crafting her narrative into a mosaic of hope and connection. What once felt daunting became an empowering dialogue, a celebration of resilience. As she delivered her concluding thoughts, a hush fell over the audience. "The turning point for me wasn't merely realizing my potential," she said, her chest swelling with pride, "but understanding that every story shared strengthens our community. When we embrace our authenticity, we inspire others to do the same. It's time we lift each other up, weaving a narrative of collective growth." The applause erupted, an unstoppable wave that rolled over her like gentle thunder, echoing the recognition of her journey. Lila's heart soared as she stepped down from the stage, each clap reverberating the changes she enacted in her spirit. She had cultivated courage, paved bridges of connection, and transformed her narrative from solitude into community. In that moment, Lila understood that she was no longer just a girl lost in a snowstorm. She was a beacon for others navigating their own journeys of self-discovery. With newfound resolve, she committed to writing not merely for herself, but as a path to touch others and foster understanding, pouring her spirit into each story like a luminary in the night. The winds of change had not only propelled her forward, they had sculpted her into an empowering force, making her presence felt in a world waiting for authenticity. Lila Thompson had stepped into her new life with undeniable strength, and the road before her felt endless, brimming with possibilities waiting to be uncovered. Now, I urge you subscribe immediately to this channel so you won't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Let your voice be heard in the comments. What were your reactions and theories about the ending? Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories recognize the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.